Acts 15, 1-2. Certain people came down from Judea to Antioch and were teaching the believers, unless you are circumcised, according to the custom taught by Moses, you cannot be saved. This brought Paul and Barnabas into sharp dispute and debate with them. So Paul and Barnabas were appointed, along with some other believers, to go up to Jerusalem to see the apostles and elders about this question. Okay, now, it's not really so surprising you have this. Remember, Jesus was what? The Messiah. The Messiah was expected to be a king from the line of David who was going to rule what? Israel forever, ever. So he was a Jewish thing. So it's not surprising that the Jewish believers said, hey, wait a minute. For a Gentile to be saved, he's got to become a Jew because the Messiah is for Jews. And Paul was saying, no. No, Gentiles do not have to become Jews to be saved. Well, they decided they were going to go up and talk to all the leaders of the church and get a decision on this. Okay, Acts 15, 19-20. This is James, the brother of Jesus. It is my judgment, therefore, we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to God. Instead, we should write to them, telling them to abstain from foods polluted by idols, from sexual immorality, from the meat of strangled animals, and from blood. Two things here. On a side note, in Romans 14, we're going to see that one of the problems is that people are vegetarians. The weak ones are vegetarians. Why? Because picture the markets. They were on the streets and, there was no FDA. There was nobody. You could say whatever you wanted. Nobody could check you out. And you want to sell your goods. So the equivalent in the market of saying all natural is my meat was blessed in the temple and therefore healthier for you. And they would charge a premium. Well, because there was nobody checking them out, everybody said that about their product. So all the meat in the marketplace was dedicated to the Roman gods, which is one of the reasons that the Christians in Rome refused to eat meat. The other thing to point out here is, notice James' decision was about the Gentiles, not Jews, Gentiles. If you look at the whole passage, this was not an immediate decision. There's a lot of debate, a lot of discussion. So this was a really hard issue for them, And eventually they came to a conclusion because of James. But the conclusion was Gentiles only. So even though you see in Acts 10, God says, hey, you Jews are no longer under the law. In Acts 15, where you get all the leaders together, they don't get it. They say, oh, this is only about the Gentiles. The Jews are still under the law. Okay, before we go further, one of the things that we always notice is that when Paul went to a new city, he always went to the synagogue. That's like the Jewish church. If he was the apostle to the Gentiles, why the heck is he going to synagogues? Well, the answer is that the Jews, a lot of the Jews that were spread out over the empire had relatives in Israel, or they visited during Pentecost. And those people, when they visited Israel or had relatives, they heard about Jesus. But they wanted to know more. I mean, this is exciting. So when Paul came and said, hey, I can tell you more about Jesus. He had a ready-made audience. And so it was a good place for him to get started. Now remember, the Roman church was mostly Jewish. We know that from archaeology. There were very few Gentiles in that church. That's why when you see his arguments, he refers to Abraham, David, Moses. The Gentile would go, who the heck are they? What are you talking about? Where the Jew would instantly understand what he was saying. So when you look at his argument, it's pretty clear that the Roman church was mostly Jews. So then you say, well, wait a minute. I thought he was an apostle to the Gentiles. What's going on here? Well, what we see is he is only one man. He goes to the synagogues, he goes to the Romans, and he starts making them less Jewish and more Gentile. He gets rid of the Jewish regulations, the food regulations, the things that would make it hard for a Jew to communicate with a Gentile. Remember in Galatians where Peter wouldn't sit and eat with Gentiles because some of the strict people from Jerusalem were visiting? How do you get the gospel out to people if you won't sit with them and eat and you won't talk to them? So Paul is making the Jews less Jewish so that they can be missionaries to the Gentiles. So in a lot of ways, it's not so much Paul himself is going to be a missionary to the Gentiles, so much as he is making missionaries to the Gentiles. So what we have a lot of Jewish Christians that believe that for a Gentile to be saved, they've got to become Jews. And they're at the Roman church. And Paul has been spending the whole book of Romans arguing against the things that we're saying, because they didn't like his gospel. One of the things that a Jew did is the Sabbath was special. So they thought that everybody needed to worship on the Sabbath and that you couldn't do any work. And so that was a special day. That was one of the issues that Paul's addressing in Romans 14. The Christians that accepted what Paul was saying go, hey, all days are the same. It doesn't really make any difference, you know. But the Christians in Rome that were still this old-fashioned group that believed that the Gentiles had to become Christians, they believed that you had to keep the Sabbath. And of course, that's where the conflict came. And what's interesting is, although Paul sided with his followers saying, you are the strong Christians, he basically said, hey, don't look down on those guys. You need to get along with them.